said so many things. But
where's your notepad at, Chuck?
No, I need a notepad.
It's my fault. I didn't.
Yeah, I don't mean to. Because this probably opened up a whole another can of worms. This is another major discussion. Chad and I have been having this discussion on his platform. We've been getting a lot of engagement, going over the Civil War, what was his actual motivations, who was Abraham Lincoln, what was his real agenda, so on and so forth. But there were a lot of voting restrictions for blacks in the South and in the North. And in fact, Illinois in particular and various other northern states were not only were blacks not permitted to vote, but many northern states would not allow blacks into their state. They have various laws. If you came to the state, you couldn't move to Illinois and in Michigan, Ohio, some of these other states. You couldn't, move, set up shop and establish yourself and start a family. They weren't allowed,
and these were northern states.
These were northern states. And what upset a lot of Southerners was the hypocrisy, because blacks weren't treated particularly well in the North either. And there was a better communal type relationship between blacks and whites that was fostered by way of familiarity, even if there was a slave master, slave owner dynamic, that kind of a kinship and just kind of being, used to one another.
I mean, Abraham Lincoln said that slavery was the most weirdest. He was the most peculiar institution.
Yeah, well, he called it a peculiar institution, but Lincoln didn't particularly care too much for black people, to be honest. And this just
I didn't say you did.
No. I'm not saying you. I'm not saying that. But what vexed Lincoln more so than anything else was this idea that pretty much the state, each individual state, can do within, of course, within constitutional confines, for sure. But the states, have a stake in the governing of their own affairs, and this interfered with Lincoln's long-term vision for his. There was a term for it. I forgot what it's called, but the whole issue of the split between North and South, and this was, a lot of people say, well, the Democrat Party and slavery and these things. Well, that's not entirely true, if it is true at all, to be honest. The Democrat Party,
it's about to get good now.
Yeah, the idea was about tariffs and high taxes. And the idea of Lincoln, and there were many others like him who had this idea that the United States was to become a kind of rival to the British Empire and to the sort of newly emerging German Empire under Otto von Bismarck. When you see the consolidation of Germany sort of happening around the same time that the Civil War or the war between the states was going on. And so there was a lot to Chad's point, a nuance there, because like you said, Vince, a lot of people looked at the Republicans as though they didn't belong there, because the Republican Party agenda at the time was to undermine the authority of the states for the purpose of creating this new sort of America, and for so much talk, and for so much we talk about with the progressive era in the late 19th century, the early 20th century, and the eugenicists and all that stuff, and we may even get into some of that stuff, but the mid 1800s, from the Civil War and on into the era of Reconstruction, that in fact was America's first progressive era. A lot of people don't think of it that way. But if you know and you understand the ideas of the Whigs and then later on the Republican Party, that's what the schism was all about. It was about the federal government versus the states. Even if you go back and you read Alexander Hamilton and Federalist 34 or Federalist 17, and Alexander Hamilton talked about a lot of these things, but Alexander Hamilton was a big executive branch guy.
Yes.
He's a Federalist.
He was a big executive branch guy.
Well, he wasn't a Federalist, though.
But when you go to it,
Like,
government.
He was a Federalist in name only. But like the word Federalist and Anti-Federalist are actually flipped.
Flip-top, yeah.
But when you look at what the actual they call it, when you look at the Federalist Papers, and you look at the Anti-Federalist Papers and the Brutus Papers, it's actually true that people like Patrick Henry and Robert Yates and Luther Martin and others, they were the actual real Federalists because they are the ones who really believed in limited government power. They're the ones who really believed in checks and balances. They are the ones who really believed in sovereignty of the states and the local communities. That's true federalism. Right. But like it was a political kind of game of semantics.
Yes, but there's a time when theory bumps into reality.
Let me jump in when Vince is done, please.
When theory bumps into reality, like for instance, when we started the country, we had the Articles of Confederation. All the states didn't want the federal government to have any power. And for years they said, this cannot work.
I agree.
Theory bumped into reality. I agree. And they said, we got to rework this thing. They came with the Constitution.
I agree.
The Constitution stays there. The 10th Amendment is strong for years. Right. You have Thomas Jefferson and James Madison that comes out with the Virginia, Kentucky resolutions that said basically the states can nullify any law they don't like.
Right.
And have the right to succession.
And then they reneged.
Yeah, and then people looked around and then you see John C. Calhoun go to South Carolina with the nullification crisis. Him and Andrew Jackson about to go to blows over it. Yeah. Andrew Jackson's going to hang everybody in South Carolina.
Yeah. So
and they broke that down. So now this is coming to a head. Right. So what happens? You get all this new land with the Louisiana Purchase, all this new land after the war.
West.
What are we going to do with it? Right. Are we going to make America a superpower like it is up north? Manhattan was worth more than the whole South combined. Right. Or are we going to make it a slave nation where we are going to be taken over by the Europeans and Loas who are industrialized? And we got half of our country with slaves and cotton.
Yeah, this is not sustainable.
What are we going to do? We need to build a railroad from here to California, and we can't take it through slave country. Yeah. We need to build factories, and we can't go down there arguing. My hometown, Brownsville, Tennessee.
Let me ask you
some of the best cotton.
Oh, no, you got to stop. Go ahead.
It was one of the poorest counties in our state for one reason. Most of the white people own the land for cotton. They wouldn't allow factories to be built on it. They wouldn't allow anything to be done with it. But a few people had the money, cotton field, and my daddy was a sharecropper there. It finally started becoming something when they started taking that land away. And now they built a Ford factory down there that's going to pay, the starting wage is going to be about $60,000 a year, and it's going to hire 10,000 people. Right. And they did it because they finally used the law to take this land away from these people that would never, ever let it go. Yeah. And now the people are benefiting from the fact that now we can industrialize this place that's only about 40 miles from Memphis. And we have interstates. And now the people there, and I'm going there, and it's changing. And people now have money. And people are building houses, and they're not poor anymore. And so that's why they looked at the South and they said, listen, these guys, these plantation owners are going to keep it this way forever unless we go down and break this up.
Now that's my question.
And they broke it up.
I mean, that's an assumption. But I mean, it's not something I don't think we know for sure. It's especially, I mean, when you
they would have kept it.
Well, they did keep it for another 100 years.
I don't believe. I certainly don't believe that the South would have, various Southern states would have, kept the institution of slavery for perpetuity.
I
don't believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
The sharecropping system was basically the same thing without the name.
I believe that.
When you look at the writings of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate,
I don't think that would have happened.
He himself didn't believe that slavery should exist in perpetuity.
It was going to change naturally, but they weren't going to let them go unless they were forced to let them go. Because even the thing that killed the sharecropping system now was a cotton picker. Finally, they got one cotton picker that could do the job of 50 field hands.
Cotton gin.
And with cotton gin made cotton. Yeah. But what put the slave, the sharecropper system out of business was a cotton picker. Yeah. When they could get one cotton picker and they could rent them and they could do the work of, and you know what? And here's the thing a lot of people don't know. A lot of sharecroppers got mad because the cotton picker took their jobs away. And they had to find another way to make a living, and they can't pick cotton no more. And then guess what happened? The factories came down and they just started working there. So the economy always found a way. So as they freed up people from the cotton fields, the children went to school. They learned how to read and write. and the South changed forever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't only that; it was also the fact too that there were a lot of
y'all won't let Chuck be great.
There were a lot of slave owners in the South.
It's okay.
Who were freeing their slaves upon their death and other such cases. So it wasn't just, and I know you're not making this point. So it wasn't just industrialization that was marking kind of the end of slavery. There was a number of factors, both moral and practical. I was going to
say that.
But here's the question. Then why then did they say that they would stop the Civil War and rejoin the Union if Abraham Lincoln pulled back the 13th Amendment and then ratify it?
Who said
freeing
that?
the slaves. Alexander Stevenson when he met with Lincoln in Seward.
But he was the vice president.
Yeah, but he was bringing the message from Jeff Davis. They passed the 13th Amendment before the war was over. They came down and said that we will get back with the Union. We will end the war if you guys pull back this 13th Amendment. And Lincoln said, no, slavery is done. And the war went on for almost another 4 or 5 months. And almost 100,000 more died because Abraham Lincoln refused to pull back the 13th Amendment. He said, I'm not going to do it. I got Arkansas, and he needed some, because they still believe that they need, Lincoln said the South is still part of the Union. Therefore, I'm going to need Southern states to pass
a union that he essentially kind of sort of forced them back into.
Yeah.
And essentially removed a lot of their constitutional rights from them, especially, I don't even know you're talking about the 13th Amendment, but especially when it came to the passage of the 14th Amendment, which a lot of, a handful of Southern states didn't participate in. I mean, many people, if you look into the passage of the 14th Amendment, a lot of people talk about, and I think rightfully so, that the 14th Amendment was never legally passed. I don't know if anything.
Well, they did some things to pass it. They went down to Tennessee and basically arrested the legislature and made them vote for it. So they did some things. It was politics.
Yeah, it was a lot of bad politics going on. And I think even I can't recall, I may be wrong on the 2 states here. It may have been, what was it, Oregon and Ohio, something. But there were 2 states that weren't in the South or were part of the Confederate States.
One was definitely Nevada,
and they rescinded their vote, because they were so upset at what essentially the Republican dominated legislature had did to the South after allowing them to participate in some way with the passage of the 13th Amendment, then to turn around and say that, well, you have no stake here, because essentially they claim that your states are not functioning. Yeah. But they were functioning not too long ago, but now they're no longer. And
Chuck, he could have got rougher than that, because they wanted to hang all of them.
They
wanted to kill every last one of them.
And talking about Southerners. Well, especially,
and basically when you deal with they suspended habeas corpus. They basically said that you are in rebellion of the United States of America, and that you are treasonous against our government, which constitutionally you can't do. You can't commit treason against the United States government.
Well, is secession, is that treason?
Well, that's the thing. They were U.S. senators. And then they decided to pick up arms against the United States government and say they were trying to take it over. And as you can remember with John Brown, when John Brown took Harper's Ferry, it was Robert E. Lee that went and got him. Right. And basically said he's a traitor. Right. Hang him. Because he picked up arms against the United States of America. And then Robert E. Lee turned around and did the same exact thing. So you are a soldier of the United States Army, trained at West Point. Right. And you picked up arms against the Army of the United States of America. When they came down south, you were supposed to say the army is down south, we don't attack our army. Instead,
was it their army?
Well, it was the Army of the United States Army, the United States. The Army of the United States.
Are we talking about South Carolina at this point in 61?
The Army of the
was South Carolina still a part of the United States?
According to what Abraham Lincoln and you can't succeed. They say secession was illegal because there was
but he was wrong.
Talked about the fact
he was wrong.
Yeah, he was wrong.
Yeah, now that was theory.
Ooh,
because nobody can find in the Constitution where a state has a right to succeed.
We just talked about earlier how states did have a right to basically secede from the Union, did we not?
It's not in the Constitution.
Right, but it was agreed upon, wasn't it?
No, it was not. It was a theory that Jefferson and Madison had based on the 10th Amendment. It was a theory. It wasn't implied in the Constitution. You can go in front of the Supreme Court, different lawyers, different judges, different lawyers, different concepts, right? So, but it had never been adjudicated. It had never been they said Dred Scott had no rights that a white man needed to adhere to. That was theory.
Right.
You know, but you could have got another judge that said something completely different.
Right.
So if you had taken this in from the right judge, they would have said, yes, the South has a right to succeed.
Question
but
for
it
you.
had never been adjudicated on.
Was it adjudicated or did we just go the war route? I mean, you know.
Well, Abraham Lincoln said this hasn't been adjudicated. You have no right to succeed. Give me your legal, tell me the court that has given you the right to succeed, and we will adhere to it.
Okay.
You can't show me that. So you are the people in the South. Now, these states aren't in rebellion. There are people in the South who are in rebellion to the United States of America and our government. They've shot at our troops. They've confiscated our property. We're coming to get it back and arrest these people.
But can you point to one individual person who popularized the idea that individual states had no right to secede? Was it Lincoln, or could you point to someone else?
Well, Andrew Jackson basically first said it when John C. Calhoun went down there and started talking about, he was telling South Carolina because of the tariff situation, that we are going to succeed. And Andrew Jackson, you have no right to succeed. If you vote to succeed, I'm going to come down there and I'm going to hang all of you from the first tree that we get to. It was getting ready to get adjudicated, but then they made a deal. And so the whole thing just kind of went away. And it remained theory for the next, until the Civil War. And the Southerners believed it, and they had this theory about it, but it had never been adjudicated or put into law. So it became a concept of might makes right.
Now, see how you
moderator hat here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, I am in loving this gentleman's banter. I really am, but I think we gotta move on.
Okay, all right.
No, just like black folks, always stuck in the past.
Chuck was going to make a point.
Don't squelch the conversation.
But this is
only just now getting good.
This is a healthy conversation because this adds more layers, and it shows how complicated it is, not only to form a nation, but how to
keep
run it,
one,
how to keep it together, to understand its laws. It kind of transcends. It goes beyond,
because it was the same concept when the founding fathers said we have a right to leave Great Britain. King George said you don't. So guess what they said? We can't get it. We can't get along. So we got to get it on. And the war is going to determine who's right here. And that's what happened. So the South said it. Lincoln said it. Lincoln said we can't get it along. So we got to get it on. And whoever wins this war will be determined who's right in this. And Lincoln said we're going to decide that might makes right. And he said it.
That's that's why we're having this conversation. It's not that I'm disagreeing, because you're just laying out some facts about history, and this is why I was trying to lure some more of these details out, because I think these are the important conversations that people ought to start having if they want to better understand how our country should function, how it and how it is intended. It goes beyond this whole partisanship thing. When you talk about
first inaugural address, you remember what he said? He said, I promised the South that I will give a 13th Amendment allowing you to keep your slaves if you don't succeed.
Exactly. He
said, I was going to give you a 13th Amendment. We will never touch your slaves.
That's why we brought up the Corwin Amendment.
Exactly. We will never do it. And the South turned him down.
Because, and this is the point, I think.
And here was April trying to close the conversation down.
And I think this is an important conversation, because it's important.
How can you say it wasn't about slavery when was in the inaugural address?
No. But I think you can't say that. I think you sort of contradicted yourself, because if it wasn't about slavery, because Lincoln said on numerous occasions that as president of the United States, he has no authority.
He told him that.
Because the idea of the Corwin Amendment, the original proposal of the 13th Amendment, was to ban the federal government from passing laws that interfered with slavery in each individual state. Now, if Lincoln was such a man of conviction when it came to his moral opposition to slavery, then why would he even say such a thing? The reason why I don't think the argument was his moral opposition to slavery. Or whatever it was. He used it as leverage. Or whatever it was. To keep the Union together. Exactly.
No, because, it wasn't that.
Because that's what Lincoln, hold on. This is my belief. This is what Lincoln cared about most. He cared the most about, like you were talking about earlier, as far as expanding infrastructure and doing these things. Lincoln had all these various ideas about using tariffs,
taxes,
to taxes, to
his
fund
wealthy friends.
his wealthy friends, and his internal improvement projects. We would call them corporate welfare today. This is another thing.
I will not let you talk about Lincoln.
But this is the type of nuanced conversation that we need to have.
Lincoln was an abolitionist. He was anti-slavery. He said that I don't want slavery expanded.
Right.
And
he was also the quintessential politician.
But he also talked about
that's why he was so great.
Listen, he talked about the ordinance in the 1787.
During the Civil War?
Listen, he said the Southwest Ordinance.
And how he treated Northerners?
But no, do you remember when he talked about the Northwest Ordinance? He said that when we made this nation, and when Great Britain gave us the territory from the 13 colonies to the Mississippi River, the founding fathers said slavery will not be allowed in certain territories, and y'all violated that. He said, now, you are in violation of the founding of this country because the founding fathers even signed off on the Northwest Ordinance that slavery will not be allowed in these areas, and now you're spreading it. Okay. He said slavery is not supposed to be in these areas. You're violating the Northwest Ordinance. I don't appreciate it. And in his Cooper Union speech, he sat there and named all the founding fathers who had also signed the Constitution that signed the Northwest Ordinance that said slavery is not supposed to be in these areas.
Y'all trying to
but they did it anyway, and you're still expanding it. He said, I needed to stop.
But like Chad said,
and not taking it any further.
The quintessential politician.
But
because
the Southern states said this. They said that if we don't keep with the Missouri Compromise, one slave state, one northern state, Kansas Nebraska Act killed that. And so that's why they were angry, because the Kansas Nebraska Act killed the Missouri Compromise. It gave 1-to-1. Now Lincoln is saying, no, we're expanding, no more slavery. They say sooner or later our numbers are going to be so small in the House and the Senate that they're going to crush us, and we can't have that. So right now it's time for us to leave, because we don't have the leverage anymore to force these guys to give us one state. And so they said that they're going to crush us anyway. The plan is to crush us, y'all. Don't forget that. I was watching Godfather last night, and what did they say? They said, look, man, let's talk about your Godfather can live. And Michael said, no.
How many times
the job is to kill my father.
How many times a year do you watch Godfather?
I just saw it for the first time.
What?
I did. I loved it.
Well, everybody loves the Godfather.
I was yesterday years old.
But that's what the South said. No, their plan is to crush slavery.
Right.
It's to control us, control our economy. That's their job. They're playing games, and it was true. They were going to crush them.
But see, that's my point. You talked about. I mean, it just brings us back to this whole notion, this idea of consensual government and the people. When you talked about civil rights and how we, form our laws, and like I said, in theory, it's supposed to be a system where we consent. We have to give up a certain bit of our rights and so on, so that we can be governed. What say you? And I know this conversation go on forever. I know we got to move on.
I'm trying to just fast forward 100 years.
This is the rhetorical question. This is a rhetorical question. Just try my best to hold it in, because again, it begs the question of what say you when it comes to self-determination. And I think the important thing, and when we're having this conversation, is to point out how, at least in my humble opinion, sure, it is you talking about slavery is, yes, it's justified to talk about that. But when you're talking about the theory idea of secession, it goes back to the rebellion, the war against the British. And when people say, well, and like you say, you can call it a theory, that's fair, that's fine. Say, well, how could we have just fought a war for independence against the British Empire, only to then turn around and create a society where the individual states within that union
can't do what they want to do.
What we want to do.
So, you're right, but that's what he said. The guy said that when the South loses this war, they will have on his tombstone, died of a theory.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing, and that's why just the conversation. This is not say I'm right, you're right. It's just the fact that these are the conversations that aren't being talked about. Why? Because slavery has been used since that time and onward as this rhetorical device, this political cudgel, this weapon to shape this narrative.
It does.
Right.
And when in fact we were dealing with many men who are a lot smarter than we are today. I was joking around with Chad earlier today, and I said I cannot name one person in the higher chamber or the lower chamber in the legislature who could write a collection of essays like the Federalist Paper, the Anti-Federalist Paper.
Today?
There is no James Madison today. There is no Alexander Hamilton today. We are represented by a bunch of buffoons.
They're idiots.
It couldn't be.
Agreed.
And so
Alexander Hamilton was a buffoon too.
Well, yeah,
but he was a very intelligent
buffoon. Yeah. I mean, we kind of,
I believe that Patrick Henry was
another one.
Heads
above him. Yeah, I like Patrick Henry a lot. I like George Mason a lot. But I mean,
now you apply those guys to the black minds and the black leadership of today. If we had those minds leading Black America right now, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Oh yeah,
because they would have told.
Which leads me
go ahead.
to the conversation I want to have.
No, but I just think it's important because it just shows how much a lot of people don't talk about because perhaps they don't know. They don't. That it's a very rich history, and sometimes we like to boil things down to bad guys and good guys,
right?
Or bad parties and good parties. And the reality is that things are a bit more nuanced. Because you brought up Alexander Hamilton. Andrew Jackson. Mm-hmm. And Andrew Jackson said, no. And Chad has said out of his own mouth that a lot of Andrew Jackson's ideas and things that he stood for, Chad is somewhat of an admirer of Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson,
that's going to be hard to argue.
He that's one of the founding members of the Democrat Party, and he said some of the exact same things that Lincoln said. Mm-hmm. There can be no secession. So see how nuanced it gets.
When he got up in that White House, you look at that for the federal government.
For the federal government, and
when John C. Calhoun was the senator from South Carolina, he was
for the state
South Carolina. Because as you know, the senators were elected from what? The state legislature
until the 17th Amendment.
And they had to go talk to they didn't talk to the people. Right. They talked to the legislatures.
That's right.
And the legislatures told them, this is what you go up to Washington and you tell them. Mm-hmm. And so they would go up there and they would talk to the federal government from the state legislatures, and it was a different dynamic. Mm-hmm. And they were really speaking for their state, not the people. The people talked to the legislature, and the legislature talked to the senator, and he took it up to Washington, D.C.
That's what a republic is.
And then, then we messed it up, when we decided.
Well, now you get the brain dead. Is it democracy? So
life is a burden, y'all.
What I want to do,
trying to figure this out for centuries. We ain't figured it out yet.
I think that how we figured out is this very last thing is to try to get men to get back to the concepts of the founding fathers when it came to freedom. When you get your freedom, what did they do? They go back they went to their farms and their shops.
Preferably the anti-federalist founding fathers, but yes.
Everybody going to assert their position.
They went back to their farms and their shops, and they lived as free men.
Yes.
Right.
And they lived as men, getting mutual respect from one another.
Yeah.
The black men from the first Rhode Island who fought for the duration of the war, who stayed there from Bunker Hill to Yorktown, all black regiment, who fought. When it ended, what did they do? They went back home
to their farms and their families,
and were free men, and were respected amongst their peers, white and black. Why? Because they fought for their freedom.
Yeah.
And then they looked at the ones that went back to they never ever fought on the plantations. They stayed and picked cotton, and they had no respect for them.
They were gentlemen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm out here fighting too.
I'll go ahead to fight to get.
In my fight,
room. Go ahead. I'm done.
Forward.
We're done.
By the way.
So no, this has been good. I think we've done a nice survey of history. I just want to bring us forward just a little bit, maybe like 100 years.
We're like camping out.
We do. So what I want to
Civil Rights Act of 1866.
Oh, have mercy! No,
we still got another.
How Supreme Court overturned all of it, didn't it?
Yeah, they did.
All of it. The Congress passed it. Supreme Court kicked it out.
That was after Andrew Johnson vetoed it.
So Plessy versus Ferguson.
No, I don't want to talk about that either. Oh gosh. Okay. No, seriously. This is what I want to talk about.
Go ahead, April. Sure.
I was having a discussion with Vince about I appreciate how in your film you present the differences between Martin Luther King Jr. and Joseph H. Jackson. And it sparked this discussion that I said, we have got to record this and talk about this in person because it was just interesting. I appreciated how you talked about the difference in philosophy or methodology between the two. And if you want to Spell that out for the audience, right? Spell that out. We'll need to introduce who Joseph H. Jackson was. What was why was he, in your opinion, the better option than MLK? And then what I want to ask you, Vince, because this is what sparked this discussion. You was like, well, I get why you think Joseph H. Jackson was better, but I got issues with that Negro too. So I'll let you start, then I'll get to you, and then I want you to see if you can break the tie.
I'm gonna try.
If you come break the tie, because come now, let us reason together.
It's gonna be hectic right here.
It is.
So, just real quick, Joseph H. Jackson. He was born in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. He was 15 years old when Booker T. Washington passed. Whenever Booker T. Washington was poisoned and died.
Wait, you believe that he was killed?
Yes, Booker T. Washington.
You want
was
to expound
killed.
on that? I'm just.
We had to have talk.
She doesn't want to camp out there.
No, I know she don't. That's why I'm teasing.
We're gonna take you in the kitchen. I just need you to bring out the meal so we can eat it.
So when you look at Joseph H. Jackson, which admittedly I don't agree with everything that he stood for or everything that he did.
Okay.
The same is true of literally anyone else in history.
Right.
I don't even agree entirely with Joseph H. Jackson's theology, right? But when it comes to the difference between he and Martin Luther King, it's Jackson's a clear winner.
Okay.
Joseph H. Jackson was a purveyor of the kind of Booker T. Washington school of thought insofar that you cast down your bucket where you are. That it's incumbent upon you to be a man of honor, and it's incumbent upon you to be a woman of virtue. That's your responsibility. Joseph H. Jackson would become the leader, the teacher of Olivet Baptist Church in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And he would serve there till the day that he died. He would also become the president of the National Baptist Convention, which boasted around 5 million colored churchgoers.
Did he call us coloreds?
You can say people of color. Can't
I love it. We're colored again. Yay.
So he was the president of the National Baptist Convention, and the bylaws were that you can't run for president, I think, more than 1 or 2 terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the fact of the matter is, Joseph H. Jackson saw the writing on the wall. He saw what was happening in the culture. Mm-hmm. He saw that the so-called proponents of the social gospel were making inroads. And he didn't want to see the National Baptist Convention succumb to that poison, succumb to what the Apostle Paul, called a counterfeit gospel.
Right.
He didn't want for the National Baptist Convention to succumb to that. So he kept running and he kept winning, and he would win by a landslide.
Mm-hmm. So we at least agree that his term was up, and technically by the bylaws, he wasn't technically supposed to run again, but he did, and he won.
Yes, you have to understand the times. We were in the middle of the Cold War, and the communists set their sights upon churchgoers.
They did.
Particularly Negro churchgoers. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Negro churchgoers were doing the bidding
of communists.
Of the Communist Party.
Right.
Of the Soviet line. Mm-hmm. And so Jackson knew this full well. Whenever they launched the so-called Montgomery bus boycott in Montgomery, Jackson initially saw it as a good thing. So he called King and said, hey, we got a bus or 2 to donate to you. King said, no, I'm not interested in the buses. So what Jackson then did is he collected $1,000 from his church, $1,000 from the National Baptist Convention, and he donated $2,000 to King, which was a lot of money in 1957. Mm-hmm. King wanted the money. He didn't want the buses. And so
to be clear, were the buses supposed to be used to usher people to and fro in light of the fact that they weren't riding the bus?
The thing about Jackson is that Jackson, again, he comes from the Booker T. Washington School of Thought.
Right. He's solving problems.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, don't beg the white man to sit on the front of the bus.
Yeah. Here's some buses.
Here's some buses. Yeah. Create your own black bus company.
Right. And there were already black bus companies.
There were already Negro bus companies. And so again, King refused the money. The buses, he wanted the money. And Jackson soon thereafter figured out, oh, I know what these guys are up to. Mm. And so, long story short, Stanley Levison, who was King's handler and advisor, advised that if you were to sit atop the National Baptist Convention, this would be huge
for you,
for our agenda. And so King at the time was young. He was fresh out of college. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to take this young person and put him at the head of the National Baptist Convention. So
they needed a puppet.
So they ran a man by the name of Gardner C. Taylor. So they ran Gardner C. Taylor, who was a veteran in the National Baptist Convention, who was also a proponent of the social gospel. And the idea was to get Gardner Taylor elected to the head of the National Baptist Convention for King, who was at the time the head of what was called the Sunday School. Yeah, the Sunday School wing of the convention. He was the vice president of that contingent. Ultimately, King would run and take charge of the National Baptist Convention, and this would be a layup in terms of having a captive audience for the furthering of
his agenda,
their agenda. And so when you look at the correspondence between King and other ministers, he's trying to build an army against Joseph H. Jackson. So he's writing letters at the command of
Levison?
Stanley Levison to all these ministers, trying to basically build a camaraderie,
cause
build an
division.
army. Yes.
Infiltrate in.
Saying, next year is our year. We're going to finally get Taylor.
I mean, that's 5 million black folks to influence.
Get Jackson.
Yeah.
And so they had the convention. Of course, Jackson wins. And the Taylor contingent demands a roll call. They demand a roll call and they rush the stage. And in the kerfuffle, A.G. Wright out of Detroit, Michigan is pushed off the stage, cracked his head, and dies. As a result of this, a lot of people believe Jackson kicked King out of the convention. That's not true. A committee within the convention voted to have King removed. So they kicked King out of the convention. They kicked his friends out of the convention. And they would go that same year in 1961 and start the so-called Progressive National Baptist Convention. So this gives you, this is insight into this notion that King actually wasn't as nonviolent as we're taught he was.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And so when you look at somebody like Jackson and his methods, I mentioned in our docuseries the Freedom Farm. The Freedom Farm was started by the National Baptist Convention, where they bought 400 acres of land, I believe, in Tennessee. And they allowed black sharecroppers who were being cheated by their farmers and the landlords who wanted to protest. Jackson said, we're not going to protest. Here's 400 acres of farmland. Work the land, pocket the money, save the money, buy your own farm. So you're not dependent on a landlord, that you're not dependent on someone else.
Right.
Again, Booker T. Washington School of Thought, cast down your bucket where you are. We have the methods, we have the means to make something of ourselves.
Let's stop begging and let's start working.
Begging, stop crying, stop moaning. It's on you to use the resources that you have to be a man. And I say be a man because that's a very interesting thing to look at.
Simple.
Because what is Jackson's perspective when it comes to being a man versus kings? Well, Jackson said that I wish you would stop complaining like women. I wish you would be a man. He said,
step-ins.
Yeah, he said, stop. He said, if you're not going to be a man, start wearing step-ins and braid your hair. And it's interesting. You see a lot of colored men today with braided hair.
You don't hear people say step-ins.
Well, it's interesting. You see a lot of colored men today with braids and dreads.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Some of them in dresses now.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly.
That too.
And so he said, if you're not going to be a man, braid your hair, start wearing step-ins. But God has carefully made you and fixed you just right. And it's on you to be a man. Right. That's what Jackson's position was. King's position, when you look at the NBC interview that he did in the late 60s with when he was at Ebenezer Baptist Church, he's behind the pulpit. He's standing up. He's being interviewed by the reporter. And he said, well, we can't be a man because if you look at the housing conditions, if you look at, we haven't been able to be people. We haven't been able to be men. And
he wants his dignity.
We just want to be men. And so it's like, and so you have King predicating manhood on what the government does.
Oh, no, white. I would say on white acceptance. I mean, he was like, crashing out because we want to sit at this counter with them and they won't let us.
That was the rules, though. He didn't really mean that, because his end goal, and I just call a spade a spade. I mean, his end goal was just full-fledged communism across the breadth and width of this nation.
But he believed in the incremental, gradual way of getting there.
The race question. I mean that again.
That was just his tool.
That doesn't mean something.
That goes back to
he was utilitarian. And so when you look at somebody like King, he was. I mean, people forget the fact that this man was trained in the communist perspective of the Hegelian dialectic.
Right. I mean,
he was trained to. He said himself that he rejected the fundamental gospel. He said that his Sunday school teachers believed the fundamentalist line of Christianity. Mm-hmm. They believed in the virgin birth. They believed in the resurrection. They believed in the literal existence of hell, all of which he rejected.
Yeah.
Right.
He said that when he found the social gospel, now we have something, right? Mm-hmm. This idea that the gospel completely free of a salvific nature.
No, there's no atonement.
There's no atonement.
Yeah.
There's no miracle of Christ raising from the dead to save you, a sinner. That doesn't exist as far as the social gospel is concerned.
No.
The social gospel is only concerned with politics. It's only concerned with legislation. It's only concerned with building a kind of Tower of Babel 2.0. That's what the social gospel is in an elementary kind of nutshell.
Right.
That's something that King could get behind. He rejected what the Bible says about Christ, what the Bible says about the gospel, and he embraced, again, what Paul called a counterfeit gospel. That is what he told Coretta Scott at the time, who later became his wife, that's the gospel that he would preach to the world. One where there's a nationalization of industry, one where there's a radical redistribution of wealth. That's the gospel, says King, that I will preach to the world. And he would go on, because a lot of people like to give me flack and criticize me and say, oh, he said that when he was in college. No, King would continue to preach that same counterfeit gospel to the day that he died.
Yes.
That mountaintop speech is chock full of the so-called of the counterfeit gospel, right? So that's what King would do until the day that he died. And so this gives you a kind of philosophical and theological difference between someone like a Jackson and someone like a King. And so it makes sense then why King would want to remove Jackson from his post at the National Baptist Convention, and that he would then step in and move the largest colored church organization in the country to the socialistic social gospel. That's what King wanted to do. And that's the difference between the two. Again, I'm not endorsing everything that Jackson stood for and everything that he said, but when you look at them comparatively, Jackson is clearly the better option.
And I don't disagree with that.
Right.
This is the problem I have, though. Jackson had a very large megaphone. Mm-hmm. And we talk about the Godfather again.
Yeah. That's absolutely.
You remember?
Are you really?
You remember when Vito was talking to Michael, and he told Michael, the guy that comes to you with the Barzini meeting, he's a traitor.
Barzini.
How clear was that?
Right.
Crystal. No, he didn't do that with King. He didn't tell us he's a liar, he's a communist, he's a Marxist, he's a traitor. Mark him.
To be fair,
stay away from him.
To be fair, he did talk about what the civil rights movement was,
but he didn't do that.
But he never called King out by name.
Right, he died in 1990.
Yeah,
I was a grown man.
Same year I was born.
I never heard this.
Okay.
Until I grew up and read it about 5 or 6 years ago.
He should have named names.
He should have named names.
He should have been marked and avoided.
Clear. It's like, I'm knowing a guy hunting you.
I thought you were going to say it in like Jackson, because he was, very, he was kind of buddy with a lot of the Democrats.
He was there too.
Oh, we gonna get there.
Maybe that was the reason why he didn't do it, because he was part of the Daily Machine. Y'all know that.
He was.
Yeah. And he had taken the black church and made it political. And again, in my mind, if you're going to be I go by this old Thomas Wolfe saying, the culture or the arts elevate to a set of beliefs. The arts make the culture make the politics. I believe that you go a step further and say religion and then the arts. and then the culture.
Okay.
Because religion is supposed to be there to watch the culture. And if the religion gets them screwed up, the culture's going to get messed up behind the religion. Even though the religion is part of the arts, but the religion is really the thing. That's why our First Amendment is freedom of religion. The religion and the virtue and the morality of the people are going to determine everything. And when the religion goes bad, everything goes bad. This is why Jesus was such a gangster, man. He stood up at that temple and said, your problem is not the Romans. There's some suckers right over there. It's some Pharisees. It's the Sadducees. Make no mistake about it. Liars, hypocrites, whitewashed tombs, vipers like your father, the devil. He made it crystal clear who the problems were. We did not have that with these people, and it hurt us very badly because it was always nuanced. This is why when I do my stuff, it is straight no chaser with me. I tell you exactly who they are. If you find yourself a black preacher dealing with the Democratic Party, he's a liar, he's an apostate, he's an affront to God. And these guys went out there and they stood with the Democratic Party, knowing what they were doing, knowing the things that they were with the feminists, with the gay rights activists, with the atheists, all of these weirdos and crazy that had gotten involved in it, using the moral absoluteness of what was going on with black people to ride and get legislation passed for themselves, which is what they did. Because, you can't discriminate on account of sex is also in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, right? Yeah. And they weren't even out there marching for that, right? They just had to be included, We was getting our asses whipped for it, but they were included in that,
They were lumped in as a joke.
Yeah, they were only as a joke, exactly. So that's the problem I have with Jackson. He had a large megaphone. Like you said, 10 million member group of
5
people.
million.
A lot of money. A lot of money. Could have been put in banks. Could have, like you said, the land. Do it everywhere.
Well,
should have kept doing it.
To be fair to Jackson, though, because while I agree with you that he should have named names, at the same time, when you are the head of the National Baptist Convention and you see people who are flirting with the kind of ideology, the kind of methods that King and his faction are producing, and not only that, they have the support of the liberal press, of the mainstream press, and you are trying to tread these waters in such a way that it's like, man, I'm losing my people.
I disagree.
You remember the blue bomb.
I'm giving you perspective. I agree.
But you remember the blue bomb when Dr. King got put in jail and they needed Kennedy to win.
Oh, the brochure.
Yeah, the blue bomb.
The blue bomb. This is how the National Baptist Convention was connected. That the Sunday before the election, they sent out 10 million of these pieces of paper to every black church in America saying, vote Kennedy. Because he called Coretta Scott King when Dr. King was locked up in jail.
And Coretta Scott King, by the way, was more radical than Martin.
Yes, he was.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yes.
And it was so hooked up that they swayed the election because of a phone call. And he couldn't do the blue bomb every Sunday to tell everybody King was a Messiah.
Like do it
Marxist.
every Sunday.
They showed the connectivity of their church and how powerful it was, and they did not do it because Jackson wanted the same thing. He just wanted different methods. He wanted civil rights. He did speeches on civil rights all the time. He spoke political all the time. He'd go to NAACP conventions and talk about the Civil Rights Act. We want civil rights, civil rights, civil rights. To hell with civil rights because it makes you believe that man can give you what only God can give you.
I agree with that.
And he was pushing it as hard as King. He's just using he didn't want to do the marches. Now, he didn't mind doing the NAACP role.
He didn't like the agitation.
Right. But lobbying and the courts were fine with
problem. And I have many faults with the NAACP, but for me, when it comes to like addressing an issue on its face, I believe that the place to do that is in the courts.
Yeah, and that's what Jackson wanted to do.
And that's
courts and lobbying legislation.
Right. And
instead of going there fighting and sitting in
and agitating and all the things.
Exactly.
And so for me, it's like, as much as I hate to admit it, I do agree more so with the NAACP approach in terms of arguing with the legality and the constitutionality of a thing more so than the King method.
Well, they did 10 times more than King them did.
Right.
And King took credit for it.
Right.
But NAACP was actually doing it.
But my point though is that I'm not saying that it's right. I'm merely saying that I understand the perspective that Jackson may have had in terms of being the president of this convention, which had all of these network of churches saying that, wow, King really has the ear of the president. King has the press. King has a lot of people in our convention. And so how do I try to gradually win them back without necessarily calling out the individual and therefore causing this, not necessarily causing a rift, because the rift has already started.
You do what the Apostle Paul did. Have I become your enemy?
Yeah.
Let me finish. Not necessarily causing a rift, because the rift has already started, but how do I try to diplomatically deal with this issue in such a way that people understand? Because he was speaking broadly when he said the civil rights faction has communist infiltration. He said that. He subsequently said that the Black radical movement in the 70s that succeeded King, that these are people who are led by communists. He didn't call out names.
Right.
He just said, broadly speaking, these organizations.
That is the problem. You have to come out with something.
I agree.
Like this, and you have to have the fight.
I agree.
You don't undermine. You don't backbite.
I agree.
You say what James A. Garfield said: a brave man looks the devil in the eye and calls him a devil.
And that's one of Jackson's failures.
The reason why Malcolm X was so effective with 100 times less of a following than King is because Malcolm would confront. He's a liar, he's Uncle Tom. He said he's wanted to sit beside white men on the toilet. The March on Washington was a farce on Washington. Malcolm said it out loud and people listened because nobody else would say it.
The Bible instructs us to do that.
Always confront. And that's the problem.
Yes.
And Jackson wanted to use the church as a political push for the Democratic Party also, because he was very political. He spoke a lot. He spoke a lot about civil rights.
But for the Democratic Party, come on, Vince, that's not entirely true.
He was a daily machine, man.
But dude, he literally endorsed Nixon, who was a Republican.
He endorsed Nixon, but that was in '68. But during the civil rights movement, he was all in with Johnson and Daley. This was afterward. 1968 was Nixon. He didn't endorse Nixon in '60.
He was an Eisenhower man as well, who was a Republican.
Yeah, but he didn't endorse Nixon in '60 when he came against Kennedy. That was Kennedy had 80% of the black community voted for John F. Kennedy in 1960, and that was because of the blue bomb that went through the National Baptist Convention. He was behind that. The Daley machine was behind that because he couldn't have won Illinois without the Daley machine and Sam Giancana.
It's about saying the mob in 60?
Yeah. So the whole Daley machine was behind that, and he was behind that.
Okay.
Johnson and Kennedy got in because they gave him Illinois. They also did the blue bomb. They were involved in the Johnson-Kennedy administration for 8 years.
So,
now,
Vince,
he did go for Nixon in '68, but the damage had been done, and they still, after they were trying to lionize King and martyr him and make him this national hero, nobody came out and did what Khrushchev did with Stalin.
And Jackson should have. I concur.
Khrushchev came out after Stalin died and said, y'all, Stalin was nothing but a killer.
Yeah.
We cannot honor him any longer. Take him out of the Kremlin wall, bury him in an unmarked grave, and told everybody who he was. Nobody on the black side that has the nerve to do that for King yet.
None of them have done it. But y'all too.
Jackson knew everything and did not do it.
Even the hoe chasing.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
And we have been led into a terrible spot in America because of it. And he knew it and didn't tell me, and I got an attitude about it.
My pushback though is that, because if you're saying, if you're talking more so in terms of timing, I agree. Like, yes, Johnson. I mean, there's pictures of Jackson alongside Johnson and things of this nature. But holistically, again, Jackson endorsed Eisenhower. He endorsed Nixon. He endorsed Reagan. So this idea, and this is the only portion of what you said that I'm pushing back on, that he was shilling for the Democrat Party is not true on its face.
Well, I said between 60 and 68, but also he was always part of the Daley machine. I don't know if he ever left it.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to, federal politics versus state politics. But when it came down to mostly him telling the United States of America and telling the black community about Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, he should have done that.
The damage that was going to happen.
I agree.
Behind us following this. He had the megaphone, a bigger megaphone. It should have been a fight. It's like we talked about the Civil War, right? We can't get along, so we got to get it on.
Right.
I'm not going to not tell my people about you.
Yeah, he should have.
They have to know.
And then
because if they don't know this, they're going to die.
And when they changed the name of the street that his church is on to Martin Luther King Jr. Drive.
Right.
He moved the front door to the adjacent street so as to not have his church on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive.
Yeah, so basically
that, like,
it was a cowardly move.
I would have done the same thing.
Yeah, it wasn't like a censorship.
But as petty as it was,
a cowardly
you should have done more.
Yeah, he should have done
a coward. I mean, come on.
The reason why, you know what, as a shepherd, if he had been taking the role of the pastor, elder, bishop more seriously, theologically, he could have easily pointed out the issues with King.
The Bible says to rebuke. The Bible says not to participate in darkness, but to expose it.
Right.
To do so in the presence of all.
Right.
So yes, I totally agree. He should have named names. He should have called it out. He should have said Martin Luther King instead of Ellison. They mean you no good. They are representative of a counterfeit gospel.
Right. He could have exposed a whole band of these freak nasty diddy crap preachers.
He did it.
That's what they were.
He did it in a broad way.
I've been cracking up.
He talked about how these factions or these undercurrents are present in these movements and in these organizations. He didn't go the extra mile in terms of calling out the names.
Well, I think the danger was so imminent. He didn't warn us that the house is on fire. It was almost like he saw the house on fire. Was like, I mean, should I go put some wood on it?
My position, and again, hear me. I agree with both you, April, and you, Vince, that he should have called names. I agree with you. But I'm willing to take what he did give in terms of saying these organizations have as its driving motor communist influences.
But
that I will take.
Chad, the truth. You had to dig for Jackson. It wasn't like he was ever president in your life like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton.
Jackson was more popular than King in his day.
Yeah, but
which is why he should have said what he needed to say.
How did you find out about Jackson?
I think his
How
point
old were
is
you?
that
I was probably 28.
people don't know because
you had to find him. It wasn't like he was there. You said, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah,
and then you looked him up, as I did.
He's a footnote now.
Yeah, and you say, "Wow!" Yeah. And you are over the National Baptist Convention with 10 million members, a boatload of money.
Because I think what you're about to say, Vince, to preempt you, that had he been more direct and called MLK out by name, perhaps his profile would have been because there was a quote unquote rivalry between the two of them.
But he's remembered in the kingdom, and that's what matters.
You know, he is, but he needed. But his job was to save. Was to bring
left us to a wolf.
Yeah. His job was to bring us to Christ, and for me to sit there with somebody that I'm supposed to know, who knows that I'm getting ready. Like for instance, I know you guys wouldn't do this to me, but you see a dude spike my drink right here,
right,
and then y'all watch me drink it. Right. And then after I'm convulsing and dying, I found out that you knew. And I'm going to say, man, you knew he put that in my drink and you watched me drink it.
Yeah,
fair point.
And this is what I'm saying about Jackson. It's the same thing. You knew this guy was a communist. You knew he was a Marxist. You knew he wasn't a Christian. You knew he was a hoe chaser. You knew all of it. And you allowed him to go up and do this march on Washington, go before the White House, write legislation for us.
Right.
Allow him to be put in the history books. You allowed a national holiday to come in this guy's name, and you didn't tell us anything?
They ain't say
man,
nothing.
I need to go dig up your grave and set your bones on fire for that.
That's a little extreme.
You know how they get the
Vince mad about it.
Yeah, you dig him up and hold a trial.
This is mad about it.
The cadaver trial. Yeah.
I don't know what I'm about to say, but
all right. So can you help settle the arguments,
I don't want to go that far with it.
or bring
Just go and urinate on the tombstone or something.
bring some clarity to it, or at least what are your thoughts?
I think we're all in agreement that Jackson stood for some great things. Had the people, black folks in particular, heeded his words, and the history of the country, and again the black community, such as it is, more specifically, would have been completely different. But
do you think it was self-preservation why he didn't say more?
Well, see, that's what I was going to say. I was going to give just a few historical notes when it comes to Jackson, as far as from my research and what I've learned about him. And in a weird way, I think it's going to kind of help you and Vince's point a little bit more, because I'm trying to figure out the why.
I look like I was taking a side. I am a moderator.
No.
Kind of look of it more as a why
You
because
literally use the word coward. You can't say that and then say I was just being moderate and neutral. Come on now.
You just being mean. Man. You just moderate. She didn't put an expletive.
Yeah, exactly.
The event in what was it, Kansas City, and of course when Joseph H. Jackson, I think he came to the funeral of Reverend.
Did he?
Yeah, he gave a
of A.G. Wright.
There. Yeah.
Oh, A.G. Wright.
A.G.
Yeah.
Wright. Yeah, he attended the funeral, and Jackson did.
Okay, yeah.
And he spoke. There was a line when he spoke at the funeral, and again, I don't believe he said King by name, but he said something to the effect that these people talk a lot about God. But so he said something to the effect that they talk about God, but God is not in them.
Why are you veiling the message, sir? I needed him to say the word. Y'all see how hard I go after Jamal Bryant? I needed him to do it like that.
These
John the
mics,
Baptist, right, going after Herod.
These mics are individually connected, so he can literally cut off my mic and only make it to where Chuck's mic is picking up the audio.
So my whole point wasn't even to get you to jump back in. But I was talking about the whole incident that occurred at the National Bank, because Chad said that they want a roll call. From my understanding, and I could be wrong, it gets minor detail, doesn't really matter. I think what matters the most is the fight that took place that results in the death of this man from my home city of Detroit.
Detroit in the house.
Right, Detroit in the house. But from my understanding, Chad, it was that they were trying to prevent a roll call. Not that they wanted one; they were trying to prevent one, because certain Jackson detractors would say, well, Jackson and Chad kind of alluded to this, that he would violate the bylaws of the convention, because he didn't want to give up power. Now people would say, well, Jackson, he was just power hungry. He couldn't see that his days were numbered, that the culture was shifting.
He took him to court, didn't he?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, they did take him to court.
Okay.
They ruled in Jackson's favor.
Yeah. That's right.
Chris Jackson now.
Yeah.
Y'all gonna take me to court?
King was 26, 27 years old.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
There was still, I guess you can say that it's fair to say that the majority of the folks were on Jackson's side, but the support for King
was rising.
His ilk, it was rising, it was growing, and Jackson was panicked. Now, some people may say, well, is this because he was worried about himself? Because there's a lot of power came with that position,
right?
Or was he genuinely concerned about the church and about other things? Because Jackson had been an outspoken critic of communism going all the way back to the 1930s. In 1935, he delivered a famous sermon. It's known to history as "Communism and the Larger Freedom of the Negro." In that speech, he did showcase and stated outright his support for Gandhi, which he would later.
Chuck, did he ever talk about Black liberation theology at all?
Yes, he did.
I don't know.
He did. Yes.
Okay.
He said that God is like, you have a contingent of people now, and this was in response to the proliferation of people like James Cone, who tried to relegate God to a color, and God is not a color. So yes, he did speak to that.
So then, yeah, so I say I mentioned that I mentioned the fight there, and like Chad was talking about the roll call, because the idea was, or some who criticized Jackson said that, well, he didn't want things to go to a vote because he feared that he would lose, and so he had people who were in his corner, in his back pocket, whatever, and they would do these, who's in favor of reelecting Jackson, say aye, and it was aye, and there would be no vote, and then he'd be the president again after having pledged the previous year that he would step down, but he just continued to hold on. I mean, people say, well, he represented the quote unquote conservative voice of the Black church, and he needed to realize that there was this new, the Martin,
the apostate faction.
The apostate faction was rising. But it's weird, and you say, why didn't he call out King? a lot of people don't mention the fact, to the extent that they mention Jackson at all, is that Jackson, he had known the King family for a long time.
I don't give a damn.
I know that's why I said what I'm about to say is probably gonna help y'all's position, because you're gonna be like, that make it even worse.
That makes it worse. It's like he knew how trifling they were.
And he sort of
trifling is crazy.
And he kind of looked at King almost like a son. It's like a mentor to, you know. And even when I think the Progressive National Baptist Convention, when it started, I believe that Ebenezer Church remained in the National Baptist Convention.
Yeah, they sure did.
They stayed. They stayed. His father, they said, we're not going anywhere. And so I don't know if
they're PBNC now.
Yeah. So maybe it was because of
PNBC.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe it was because Ebenezer stayed after the fallout, or maybe it was because of the long-standing relationship he had with the king and his father and the family. I don't know. I don't know.
As it stands now, the black church is basically apostate.
It's a mess.
They support Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ.
Right.
I mean, Jamal Bryant is basically the Pope of black Christianity in America, which is a freaking shame.
But it's fair to say.
He's out shopping running.
I think the consensus. I mean, we're trying to get Jackson the attention and the credit and the respect that he deserves for the positive things that he did do. But I think we can all agree that
would you agree that Jackson
a lot to be desired. There was an opportunity missed.
No doubt. I have no doubt whatsoever. He's a better man. He had better morals, better scruples, better ideals. He was a better man. The only thing I hold against Jackson is that he didn't come out and tell us.
Okay, I think we can all agree.
And I still think one of the biggest problems we have in Black America right now is the division of labor, that we actually take our black preachers and we make them the kings of our community. We don't have a politician, a black preacher, and a civil rights group, and they kind of check and balance each other. Like I was checking, I think that there has never been a Jewish rabbi that has been in Congress. The last Roman Catholic priest was like in the 80s. But yeah, we got black preachers everywhere.
Indian, Japanese.
Nobody except black folks.
Right. Except colored people.
And so where's the check and balance, right? Where is the Nathan that goes to David and says, thou art the man? That corrects him. Where's the Billy Graham that goes to the president and says, you can't do that?
Yeah.
They're one and the same. And so the very person who's supposed to be our moral, virtuous religious leader is making backroom deals for LGBTQ.
Because they put
and abortion and birth control and letting drag queens go in schools up in Washington, D.C. And so they corrupt our religion. And this is the problem. And King started all of that. And
he continued it. He didn't start it. He continued it.
He continued it.
Yeah.
And Joseph Jackson, not that he ever ran for office, but he was heavily involved in politics. And I don't know if he's probably in NAACP, he probably was.
He wasn't.
So, okay, good. So we took the black church and we made it an arm of politics. And basically of an apostate political party. I mean, it would be bad enough to be part of politics, but if the political movement that you were adjacent to actually mirrored your religious ideology, it'd be much better.
Right. So was Jackson being hypocritical when he said verbatim that a minister of the gospel can't be a politician?
Did he say that?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, if he said that, I agree with him.
He did.
I agree with him because you have to do things in politics that the pastor and the preacher is supposed to be the barometer. When you go too far, he's supposed to be the one to he's a safety valve. You can't do that. Why? God says no. You can't do that based on my religion. And I'm going to tell my congregation about this. You're treading now on very, 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 the whole abolitionist movement was basically a movement that started in the church.
Go back to the 19th century again.
Always back.
You can't
y'all
do
love
that.
y'all some slaves.
We try to use these
to free y'all.
Let me hear.
We try to use these moral ideologies to press our political. But now you're using the church to press an anti-Christian ideology in politics. Yeah. And that's extraordinarily dangerous. And here's the coup de grace. We're dying. It is not hyperbole.
Literally.
The nation is actually dying.
Literally.
So here's what I'll say. In light, to put a bow on this, because of J.H. Jackson's failure to mark and avoid and do what the Apostle Paul admonished the people of God to do when there's a known false teacher in the midst, effectively the Black community has been ushered into the hands of the Democratic Party. Since that's where we are.
I wouldn't say because of his failure.
Well, I would
lay his totally
no.
at the feet of Jackson.
No, obviously
that's
we're
the
speaking
implication.
broadly.
He didn't even want us against Jesse Jackson and Sharpton and all the rest of those cats back in those days that I know of. And they were leading us right there. After the Civil Rights Movement, all those cats ran right to the Democratic Party, whether Andrew
Well, even
Young,
while King was alive, like King literally lobbied the 64 convention to accept the Freedom Democrats, who were literally Marxists, who were aiming to, in a sense,
adopted the symbol
capture the Democrat Party in perpetuity to advance the communist cause.
Yeah, and it had gotten baked in by the time Ronald Reagan got
Well,
there.
the point,
If you talk, because as you know, Abernathy also endorsed Reagan and Hosea Williams did, but it had gotten baked in then that if you weren't getting free stuff from the government, if they weren't giving Black people free stuff, you were racist.
the point I was making is that has turned the Black community into this voting block of give us free.
Yeah.
Literally free things. So, since that's the case, we know that you two agree on a lot, but you disagree in terms of Black political engagement. You think the right is no different than the left, and I'm broadly summarizing your position.
I don't think that would carry the right.
Yeah, okay. I was.
But you said broadly, to be fair.
Broadly, meaning Chad has smoke for the right and the left because he doesn't believe that the right truly
Well, they don't understand their history.
Right. They don't know their history enough to where you take you have issues with them.
Right.
Whereas we know you absolutely hate the left.
Well,
you can't stand Democrats.
You can't take it to an extreme with me with hate.
Right.
Here's the thing, though.
Whatever you about to say is right. I hate it.
Whatever it is, you can't take it to the extreme.
Here's the thing, though, Mrs. Chapman. The fact is, when it comes to modern so-called Republicans,
Yes.
what they don't understand is the whole schematic of progressive, dare I say, communist agenda and tactics.
I agree.
Which includes the use of reactionaryism to their advantage, right? In the whole kind of orchestra of pushing their agenda,
Right.
the reactionary is just as useful and just as important as the activist for leftist causes. Because to the extent that a reactionary reacts, be it rhetorically or violently, that reaction is then used as a poster child for that which they are, quote unquote, coming against. And
Can you give an example?
Nonviolence, right? Bull Connor is a racist. He is anti-Black. He is anti-freedom. He is anti-civil rights.
And a Democrat.
But the thing is, though, we mustn't get hung up on Republican and Democrat just for a moment. Just for a moment.
He was, but okay.
This is what brought us here.
This is a factual truth.
Yeah.
That's a fact, but
it's undeniable.
And he died a Democrat.
Yes. However, if you listen to what the man
I was
said,
about to say something factual though.
if you listen to what the man said about what's happening within the civil rights apparatus, the man was 100% true.
He was.
So
No doubt.
flesh it out for us.
Right.
What was Bull O'Connor, the Democrat?
Connor.
Bull Connor.
He wasn't Irish.
Connor.
Did I say O'Connor?
Yeah, you did.
He may have been Irish. I don't know.
I don't know. What was Bull Connor saying
earlier.
that was correct in your opinion?
He said he were communist, Marxists, outside agitators. Yeah.
Precisely.
He wasn't wrong.
He was saying
he was
that.
absolutely right.
He was saying that.
And he was using the law enforcement tools of the day.
Right. He was saying that the Negras were.
That's what he said.
This is the word that he used.
That's what he said.
This is the word that he used.
Said. That's how
He
he
said they're
pronounced
being
it.
taken advantage of by these so-called leaders who are appealing to the lowest common denominator of our social existence in the South. They're appealing to laziness. They're appealing to the desire for free stuff. That's what they're appealing to.
I don't disagree with anything Bull Connor just said.
I don't disagree with it either.
Right, he's not wrong.
The thing is, and Vince knows this as well as I do, probably even better than I do. When you look at what King was doing in terms of the so-called Children's Crusade,
Oh gosh.
they tried this in other cities and failed, but they had success in Birmingham.
Preacher made a fool out of
basically, that was
down in Albany, Georgia.
for the audience. For the audiences, that's when King would go into the schools and bribe the children to come out and march and offer them ice cream or things.
And then no dogs were waiting for them.
And then the dogs and the hoses. So the optics of what we saw, like, oh my gosh, look at them putting those dogs and hoses on those poor children. It was all staged.
Hold that thought, Chad, please. And when you look at the footage, and I'm thinking about myself as a young man and how trouble. Oh, I skip school. You want me to do what?
Yeah.
And if you look at the march, I mean, they're dancing, they're having fun. They're playing in the water, taunting the police. That's something my little narrow 14-year-old behind would have been doing out in the street.
They're doing the Cabbage Patch dance.
Doing the Cabbage Patch in the street. They're having a good time.
Yes.
I did a podcast on this, and I had comments. People who were in that march telling me that I was correct, that they were paid, that they lied to them, that they had paid organizers lying to them, bringing them out, telling them they were ice cream. It was going to be like a little nice march, and they didn't know that the water hoses were waiting on them.
James Bevel himself.
James Bevel
himself.
Yeah, went to prison for raping his daughters.
There you go.
Yes, he did.
James Bevel himself.
Pervert, not that tall.
I didn't know he was that short, but
running women all the time. Keeping away women.
He was about the height of Prince. But James Bevel, James Bevel, who King put in, who King put in charge to run point on the whole Children's Crusade nonsense.
Well, maybe he knew he liked kids.
He said, "Yes."
Don't be around King unless you're a pervert.
This man literally.
That's the first question on the application.
Are you a pervert?
If you say no, he said, "Well, we'll see you later." If you said yes,
first question on the
you go back to the next guy. Jesse Jackson, all of them, they were pervert suckers.
But this man
time to town doing the freakish stuff.
James Bevel literally said out of his own mouth hole that we went after children as young as 6.
Wow. Oh boy.
Now I have a 5-year-old, 5-year-old daughter who's about to turn 6. I can't imagine.
I'd go crazy.
I can't imagine her being part of some kind of nonsensical children's crusade.
Right.
But Bevel said we went after children because they were susceptible.
Yeah.
Dang, that's why they always come for the kids.
See? Chad, we're gonna have to do a movie on this.
Said it openly. Said it openly with no shame. I don't know if he ever repented for what he did.
He went to prison for what he did. His son came out and was like
100%. 100%.
All the civil rights individuals knew of James Bevel's pedophilia.
Right.
And he vowed not to talk about their homosexuality if they didn't talk about his pedophilia.
They all had there was a circle firing squad.
Oh yeah, they were super gay.
Yeah.
But the thing is,
they're gay now.
You said about Jesse Jackson's homosexuality. That's what his son said.
Yeah.
But when you look at the fact that
that's what he said.
But when you look at the fact that so the thing is, people like to champion King as he was the one who came up with this bright idea of nonviolence. He came up with this idea of direct action, where you go into these communities, you go into these places in the South, and you do a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration. You make sure that you're dressed just like we are dressed here right now. And you just show up, you want to vote. And the white man is going to show his racism by getting his dogs, by getting his hoses, by getting his batons to chase us out because they don't want us to vote. That's completely a made up press narrative to, in a sense, sway public opinion.